I'm Anya Sharma, 35, and for over a decade, I believed I was the strong one, the daughter who always landed on her feet, so I got a used Bluetooth speaker for my wedding. My sister, Priya, was delicate, so she got a $120,000 Charleston wedding. I believed this until my mother, Mrs. Jaya Sharma, called, demanding I pay Priya's rent again. That call, while I stared at my cheap speaker, changed everything. What if my entire life was built on a lie? In a dead father's laptop, I found a spreadsheet tracking every dollar spent. Priya's column totaled hundreds of thousands. Mine, a single zero. Then, a hidden will, meticulously drafted, leaving me $250,000, which my mother had concealed for 4 months. She had no idea that her casual demand that Tuesday morning, while she probably sipped her coffee, had just lit the fuse on a decade of deception. Before I tell you what happened when they saw me, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy this story. Also, I'd love to know where you're watching from and what time it is there. Drop a comment below. I'm Anya Sharma, and I was 32 years old when my family gave me a used Bluetooth speaker for my wedding. Not a new one. My cousin Kavita pulled it out of a drawer, wiped the dust off, and handed it to me like a trophy. 3 years later, my mother, Mrs. Jaya Sharma, called and asked me to pay my sister's rent. My sister, Priya, had just gotten divorced, you see. And family takes care of family. That's what Mom said. But the thing none of them knew was sitting in my dead father's laptop in a spreadsheet he never told anyone about. And what he typed at the very bottom of it changed everything. The call came on a Tuesday while I was reviewing complex client briefs for a marketing campaign. I almost let it ring out. My mother's name on the screen still does something to my chest. Even now. Anya, honey, she said. And her voice had that warm, syrupy thing it gets when she wants something. I need to talk to you about Priya. Priya is my older sister. She'd married a man named Nickel at a lavish estate in Charleston, South Carolina, 5 years ago. And now Nickel was gone. And so was the house. And so was most of the money. She's really struggling since the divorce, Mom went on. She can't make rent this month. I told her you'd help. Not asked. Told. I set my stylus down and looked at the speaker on my shelf. The little black brick that had been my wedding gift. Still sitting where I'd put it the day I got married. I'd never used it. I'd never thrown it out either. How much? I said. And I hated that my first instinct was to calculate. To find the money to fix it. Just the 1 month. Maybe 2. With my family, maybe 2 always became maybe 12. Mom, I said, why is it always me? There was a pause, the kind she uses like a weapon. Because you're the one who can, she said, like that settled it. Like being capable was the same as being available, the same as being endless. I told her I'd think about it. I hung up and sat there in the quiet of my home office, 35 years old, a data analyst specializing in forensic accounting who'd built a life with her own 2 hands, and somehow I still felt like the kid in the back of the family photo. Why was it always me? I didn't have the answer yet, but I was about to find it. Let me tell you about my wedding because it explains everything that came after. I married Rohan in a community hall in Atlanta with 60 folding chairs and a potluck. I paid for it myself. Every dollar. The deposit. The flowers from the grocery store. The cake from a bakery that gave me a discount because I'd helped them streamline their inventory management for free. I was 32. I'd been working since I was 18, since the year my father's long-haul routes got cut, and I left community college early to help cover the mortgage. Nobody told me to. I just did it, because that's what you do when you're the one who can. So, I didn't expect a check from my parents. I'd learned not to expect things, but I'll admit, some small foolish part of me thought they might surprise me. They did in a way. 2 weeks before the wedding, my mother called Kavita, my cousin, and arranged the family gift. Kavita showed up with a Bluetooth speaker she'd had in a junk drawer, the kind you get free with a phone plan. So you can play music at the reception, she said, beaming like she'd solved something. I said, thank you. I meant it even. I told myself I didn't need a party, didn't need a fuss, didn't need anything that came with strings. I almost believed it. Rohan squeezed my hand under the table that night and whispered, "You okay?" And I said, yes. Because I was the strong one, and the strong one is always okay. I put the speaker on a shelf when we got home. I never played a single song on it. Some part of me already knew it wasn't really a gift. I just didn't have the word for what it was yet. Now, let me tell you about Priya's wedding because the contrast is the whole point. There's a photograph on the mantle at my mother's house. It's framed in heavy silver, the kind of frame that costs more than my centerpieces did. In it, Priya stands at a Charleston estate at golden hour, her designer gown trailing across the manicured lawn. 200 guests blurred behind her. A string quartet you can almost hear just by looking. 5 years ago, my mother spent $120,000 on that day. I know the number because she said it out loud more than once, the way some people recite scripture. 120,000, she'd say, and worth every penny. The catering alone was more than Rohan and I made in 3 months. There were monogrammed napkins. There was a man whose entire job was to hand people champagne. And here's the part that still catches in my throat. When my parents announced they were paying for Priya's wedding, my mother sat me down, took my hand, and said, "Don't you worry, sweetheart. We'll always be fair to both our girls. Whatever we do for Priya, we'll do for you." She looked me in the eye when she said it. I believed her. I was 28, and I believed her completely. So, when my turn came 2 years later, and the family gift was a used speaker from a drawer, I didn't get angry. I got confused. I kept waiting for the rest of it, the check, the explanation, the fairness she'd promised with her hand in mine. It never came. And every holiday after, I'd walk into that house and see Priya glowing in silver on the mantle, and I'd feel something I couldn't name pressing on my ribs. I know the word now. It was the beginning of understanding. I did ask her once, just once. It was the Diwali after my wedding, and I'd had half a glass of wine, which for me is reckless. We were in the kitchen, just the two of us, and the question came out before I could stop it. "Mom," I said, "why did Priya get Charleston and I got a speaker?" I kept my voice light. I even smiled. I'd learned to deliver hard things gently, the way you'd hand someone a knife, blade turned away. My mother didn't even look up from the dishes. She rinsed a plate, set it in the rack, and said the sentence I would carry for years. "We can't do the same for everyone." That was it. That was the whole answer. Not we couldn't afford it because they clearly could, running a successful boutique hotel chain. Not we're sorry. The timing was bad. Just we can't do the same for everyone. Said in the same flat tone you'd used to explain why the sky is blue. As if fairness were a finite resource, and Priya had simply gotten there first. I stood in that kitchen and felt the floor tilt a little under me, because she'd promised. With my hand in hers, she'd promised. And now she was telling me, without a flicker of guilt, that the promise had never really applied to me. "Okay," I said, because what else do you say? I dried the dishes she rinsed and we talked about the weather and I drove home that night and didn't cry because the strong one doesn't cry. But I never forgot the exact weight of those 7 words. We can't do the same for everyone. I would hear them in my sleep. I want to be clear about something because I think it matters. I'm not telling you this as a sad person. I'm telling you as the forensic data analyst who uncovered a multi-million-dollar embezzlement scheme for a regional bank in Atlanta. I'm good at what I do. I left school early. Yes. But I went back at night. One certification at a time for 6 years until I had the degree and then the specialized license. I bought a small house at 29, 800 square feet. A lemon tree in the yard. A mortgage I pay on time every single month. I built that. Nobody handed it to me. And I think that's exactly why my family did what they did. Because I never fell apart. They decided I never needed anything. Priya cried. So Priya got rescued. I coped. So I got nothing. My strength wasn't admired. It was used. It became the reason they could keep choosing her and calling it fair. Anya's fine, they'd say. Anya always lands on her feet. And the thing is, I did land on my feet, over and over. But nobody ever asked how much it cost me to keep landing. There's a particular loneliness in being the capable one. You become furniture. Reliable, load-bearing, invisible. People lean on you without ever wondering if you're tired. I'd made peace with it mostly. I told myself it was maturity. I told myself wanting more would be selfish, would be childish, would make me like Priya. So I stayed quiet and steady and useful year after year. And maybe I'd have stayed quiet forever. But then my father died in March, and 4 months later, a laptop landed in my lap that nobody else wanted. And quiet is a hard thing to keep once you've finally seen the truth. My father, Mr. Raj Sharma, was a quiet man in a loud family. He fixed things, his old truck, the plumbing, the squeaky gates. He didn't say much, but he'd sit with you. When I was studying for my data analysis certifications at the kitchen table at midnight, he'd come down in his robe, make 2 cups of chai, and just sit across from me reading. He never said he was proud, but he sat. He died in March, a heart attack, fast, no warning. The funeral was a blur of casseroles and people I half recognized telling me how strong I was being even then. Even at my own father's funeral, I was the strong one. About a month after, my mother started divvying up his things. Priya took his collection of vintage model trucks without asking. Uncle Suresh took the old, rusted-out truck he refused to sell, and the laptop, an old gray Dell my father used for nothing anyone could imagine, sat on the dining table while everyone walked past it. "Anya, you take that," my mother said, waving a hand. "You're the one who's good with computers. There's nothing on it anyway. Your father barely knew how to turn it on." I almost laughed. My father had rebuilt an engine from memory, but I took the laptop because it was the only thing of his anyone offered me, and I wanted something of his. I drove it home and set it on my kitchen table next to the lemon tree's shadow, and I didn't open it for 2 weeks. I wasn't ready. Then one night, after my mother's call about the rent, after I'd nearly transferred the money out of sheer habit, I sat down with a glass of water and opened my father's laptop. I figured I'd wipe it, donate it, move on. I had no idea what he'd left me. Nobody did. But before the laptop, I have to tell you about the funeral reception because it's where I should have understood and didn't. We were all at my mother's house afterward. The silver-framed Charleston photo presiding over the room like a saint. People milled around with paper plates. And my mother found me by the window, put her hand on my shoulder, and said it. "You've always been the strong one, Anya." She said it like a compliment. She always said it like a compliment. "Priya's just falling apart over your father. But you're steady. You'll keep us all together." And Uncle Suresh, hovering nearby with a beer, nodded along. "That's our Anya," he said. "Self-sufficient. Always has been. Self-sufficient, as if it were a personality trait I'd chosen and not a survival skill I'd been forced to build." Then, across the room, I watched my sister corner my mother near the kitchen. I couldn't hear all of it, but I heard enough. Priya, dabbing her eyes, saying something about the lawyer, the divorce, how she didn't know how she'd manage. And my mother, my father not even cold, patting her hand and murmuring, "We'll figure it out, baby. We always figure it out for you. For you. Not for the family. For you." I stood by that window holding a paper plate I had no appetite for, and I felt the old familiar thing settle over me, that pressing weight on my ribs. The strong one, the steady one, the one who gets nothing because she needs nothing, and needs nothing because she gets nothing. A circle with no door in it. I drove home that night and told myself I was grieving. That's all. I didn't let myself see the pattern. Not yet. The pattern was waiting for me, though. It was sitting in a spreadsheet with my name in a column and a 0 beside it. That night, I drove home with the laptop on the passenger seat and the radio off. When I got inside, the first thing I saw was the speaker on the shelf. The little black brick. My wedding gift. I picked it up for the first time in 3 years and just held it, turning it over in my hands. It was lighter than I remembered. Cheap plastic. There was still a faded sticker on the bottom from the phone company that had given it away. And I thought about Charleston. 120,000 at an estate, monogrammed napkins, a man paid to carry champagne, and this. This was what I was worth to them. Weighed and measured and handed over in a junk drawer brick. It wasn't even an insult, really. An insult requires effort, attention, the acknowledgement that you exist enough to wound. This was something quieter and worse. This was an accounting. They'd done the math on me a long time ago, and this was the number they'd landed on. I set the speaker down. I almost gave them the rent money that night, you know. I'd done it my whole life. Paid, smiled, stayed quiet, kept the peace. My thumb was actually over the transfer button on my banking app. If you've ever been the one who always gives, the one who keeps the family afloat and gets a junk drawer brick in return, stay with me. Because instead of sending the money, I opened my father's laptop. And what I found in there changed how I see all of it. The laptop wheezed to life, like an old man climbing stairs. The desktop was almost empty. A faded photograph of the lake we used to go to, when Priya and I were small, before the money mattered, before the rankings, a few program icons, a recycle bin he'd never emptied. My mother was right about one thing. My father had not been a digital person. There was no email open, no browser history worth speaking of. I almost closed it right there and started the wipe, but then I saw it. A single folder on the desktop, sitting off by itself near the corner, as if he'd placed it where it wouldn't be noticed. It was named Simply Girls. I stared at it for a long moment. My father, who barely turned the thing on, had made a folder and named it for his daughters. My cursor hovered. Some instinct told me this mattered, that I was standing at a door I couldn't unopen. I double-clicked. Inside were maybe a dozen files, scanned documents, a few photographs, a couple of text files, and one spreadsheet, an Excel file with a name that made my breath go shallow before I'd even open it. It was called Savings for Girls. I didn't open the spreadsheet first. I wasn't ready for numbers. I clicked on the photographs instead, buying myself a moment, and what I saw there undid something in me before the real reckoning even began. Because my father, the man who never said he was proud, had been keeping things quietly for years. And I was about to find out exactly what. The photographs were of me, not the posed ones, the real ones. Me at 19 in my work boots, holding my first paycheck from the surveying company, grinning like an idiot. Me at the kitchen table at midnight, asleep over my study guides, a blanket someone had put over my shoulders. I never knew he'd taken that. Me on my certification day, the night degree finally finished, standing alone because nobody had come, and there he was behind the camera, the only one who'd shown up. I'd thought I was alone in that photo. I wasn't. He was there. Then I opened the text files, and they were letters. Not sent. Just written. Dated. Saved. The first one was from 4 years ago. Anya, it began. You won't read this for a long time. Maybe not until I'm gone, and that's all right. I'm not good with saying things out loud. Your mother is better at the talking. But I see you. I want you to know I see you. I had to stop reading. I put my hand over my mouth and sat very still in my kitchen. The lemon tree's shadow stretched across the floor, and I let myself feel the thing I'd been refusing to feel for years. Someone had seen me. The whole time I thought I was furniture, invisible, load-bearing, and ignored. One person in that family had been watching and writing it down, and saving it in a folder named for his girls. The letters went on. He wrote about the unfairness. He wrote that it kept him up at night. He wrote that he didn't know how to fix it while your mother runs the money, but I'm working on something. I'm working on something. I read that line 3 times, and then I knew I had to open the spreadsheet. But I didn't open it that night. And I know how that sounds, coming from a forensic data analyst, a woman who lives by data and never leaves a number unverified. The truth is, I was afraid of what the spreadsheet would confirm, and some stubborn, loyal part of me wanted to be wrong. So I closed the laptop with my heart pounding and decided I needed to talk to my mother first, before I knew whatever it held. I wanted to give her one fair chance to be honest, to tell me herself, before I went looking for proof I couldn't unsee. So, the next morning, I drove over. The Charleston photo greeted me from the mantel, Priya glowing in silver, and I made myself look away from it. I found my mother, Mrs. Jaya Sharma, at the kitchen table with her coffee. Mom, I said, sitting down, I've been thinking about Dad, about how things were. Did you ever feel like maybe things weren't fair between Priya and me? I gave her the gentlest possible opening, a door wide enough to walk through. She didn't walk through it. She set her cup down, and her face did the thing it does, that smooth closing over, like a pond freezing. Don't start, Anya, she said. Your sister is going through a divorce. This is not the time for your jealousy. Jealousy? I let the word sit there. I'm not jealous, I said quietly. I'm asking a question. Priya needs lifting up, she said, and she actually pointed at the photo on the mantel, at the silver frame, as if it were evidence in her favor. She's delicate. You've never understood that because you've never needed anyone. Then she leaned forward, and her voice dropped, and she said something I didn't understand the weight of until later. And whatever's in your father's old things, you leave it be. He was a sentimental old man, and there's nothing in there but junk. Don't go digging up trouble. Don't go digging. I looked at my mother across that table and felt the floor tilt again, the same tilt as the Diwali in the kitchen. She knew. I didn't know what she knew, but she knew there was something, and she was telling me not to look. I drove home with my mother's words ringing in my ears. Don't go digging up trouble. And here's the part I'm not proud of. I almost listened to her. Because that's the thing about being the strong one, the steady one, the keeper of the peace. The role gets into your bones. My whole life had been built on not making waves, on absorbing the cost so nobody else had to. The thought of opening that spreadsheet, of confirming what I was starting to suspect, of becoming the person who blew up the family, made my stomach turn. It would be so much easier to just pay Priya's rent, to close the laptop, donate it, keep the peace one more time, to stay furniture. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time that evening, the laptop closed in front of me. My mother's voice in my head telling me I was jealous, telling me to leave it be. And underneath that, fainter, my father's voice from the letter. I see you. I want you to know I see you. For once in my life, I let myself ask the question I'd never been allowed to ask. Not why is it always me, a different one. What about me? What about what I needed? What I was owed? What I'd been promised with her hand in mine? Nobody had ever asked it on my behalf. So I asked it myself, out loud in my empty kitchen, and my voice cracked on it. What about me? And then I opened the laptop and I opened the folder named Girls and I put my finger on the trackpad and I clicked the file called Savings for Girls. The room was very quiet. The lemon tree's shadow had gone, and the spreadsheet opened. It was simple. That was the worst part. Not some sprawling secret ledger, just a clean little spreadsheet my careful father had built and maintained for years. 2 columns. One labeled Priya, one labeled Anya. And under Priya's name, the entries went back 15 years. College tuition, the full 4 years, $150,000. A luxury car at graduation, $50,000. The down payment on her first condo, $80,000. And there, near the bottom, the line that made the room go silent around me. Charleston wedding, 120,000. Row after row after row, a decade and a half of my parents' money flowing in one direction. The Priya column totaled to a number I had to read twice. Then I looked at my column, the one labeled Anya. It had exactly one entry, a 0. Not even a list of things they'd considered and declined. Just a single, clean 0 sitting alone in all that white space. The way I'd sat alone at my certification day. The way I'd stood alone by the window at the funeral. 0. My father had been keeping score, and the score was the thing I'd felt on my ribs my whole life. Finally rendered in black and white, finally undeniable. I sat there, and I didn't cry. I went very still, and very cold, the way I get when a calculation comes out wrong and someone's life depends on me finding the error. Except there was no error. The math was perfect. They'd spent a fortune on one daughter and a 0 on the other, and called it fair, and made the 0 feel grateful. And then I scrolled to the very bottom of the sheet, below the totals, to a single cell where my father had typed a line of plain text. No formatting, no flourish, just my father, in his quiet way, leaving a message for whoever finally found this. It read, "For Anya, because no one else will." And beside it, a note. "See Will, sealed copy, Attorney A. Desai, Atlanta." My father had made a will, a separate one, and he'd left me a map to it. I didn't sleep. At 8 o'clock the next morning, I called the office of Desai, attorney at law, and by some mercy, he had a cancellation and could see me at 11 o'clock. Arjun Desai was a careful man in his 60s with reading glasses pushed up on his forehead. When I said my father's name, Mr. Raj Sharma, something in his face softened. I wondered if you'd come, he said. Your father told me his daughter was a data analyst. He said you'd understand a document when you saw one. He pulled a file, and he laid it out for me plainly. About a year before he died, my father had come in alone and executed a will. Properly. Witnessed, notarized, valid. It didn't touch the house or the joint accounts. Those were my mother's. What it covered was money my father had set aside over years, quietly, out of his own separate account. The one he'd kept from his long-haul trucking work and never mentioned. The amount left specifically to me was $250,000. He was honest with me about it, Desai said. He told me the true gap between what they'd spent on your sister and on you was far larger, well over $500,000. But the joint money and the house weren't his alone to give. This was the most he could set aside without your mother's name on it, from his own account, over years. He said it wouldn't make things even. Desai looked at me over his glasses. His words were, "It won't make it fair, but it'll make it clear who saw her." Then Desai said the thing that turned my grief into something harder. I retained the signed original here in my office, as your father asked, so it couldn't go missing. I sent your mother a courtesy copy when your father passed as he'd instructed, so the family would be aware. He frowned slightly. I expected someone to come in about initiating probate by now. It's been 4 months and not a word. For months. My mother had received this document 4 months ago, and she had said nothing to me, to anyone. She had told me to leave the laptop alone. She had known the whole time. I want to tell you exactly what I felt when I understood that my mother had hidden my father's will for 4 months because it wasn't what I expected. It wasn't rage. Rage, I could have managed. Rage burns off. What I felt was a cold, clean clarity, like the moment a fogged windshield finally clears and you see the whole road at once, because it reframed everything. That sentence she'd given me in the kitchen all those years ago, the one I'd carried like a stone. We can't do the same for everyone. I'd always heard it as a limit, as if there were only so much love, so much money, so much fairness to go around, and Priya had simply needed more of it. I'd spent years trying to be understanding about it. But sitting in my car outside Desai's office, I finally heard it for what it actually was. Not a limit. A choice. A lie even, because they could do the same. They had the money. My father had literally set aside the difference and put it in writing. She could have honored that the day she got the letter. Instead, she'd buried it, told me there was nothing in his things but junk, and called my asking jealousy. We can't do the same for everyone wasn't a sad truth about scarcity. It was the story she told to make a deliberate choice sound like a law of nature, and I had believed her for 10 years. I sat in that car, and I did not cry, and I did not call anyone. I just felt the cold clarity settle, and with it, for the first time in my life, the absence of guilt. Whatever I did next, I would not feel bad about it. My father had seen me. Now it was time everyone else did, too. Then Uncle Suresh called, which he never does, and I knew Mom had deployed the reinforcements. "Anya," he said, gruff and uncomfortable, "your mother's worried sick. You know Priya can't fend for herself like you can. It's just family helping family. Family helping family in one direction. Always one direction." "I hear you, Suresh," I said, and I kept my voice perfectly calm, the way I do at the climax of every hard conversation. "I'll be in touch." And I hung up, and I did not send the money. And I started making a list of what I needed to do in order, carefully, like any good data analyst does before the load comes down. When the direct pressure didn't work, the story changed. That's how these things go. If they can't make you pay, they make you the villain. My cousin Kavita, the very one who'd handed me the junk drawer speaker at my wedding, started calling around the family. I heard about it from my Aunt Geeta, who's never been able to keep a secret in her life, bless her. "I just think you should know what's being said," Geeta told me on the phone, lowering her voice like the family could hear. "Kavita is telling everyone you're refusing to help Priya. That you're, well, that you're greedy. That you're trying to get your hands on Raj's money now that he's gone." "Greedy? Trying to get my hands on my own father's money?" The money he'd set aside specifically for me, in writing, that my mother was sitting on. The audacity of it was almost impressive. They'd hidden the will, denied me the inheritance, and were now preemptively casting me as the gold digger for wanting what was already mine. It was a clever move, honestly. Get out ahead of the story. Poison the well before the water comes up. And I'll admit it stung, the way it always stings to be slandered by people who know better. But here's what I did. I walked over to the shelf and I picked up the speaker, the little black brick, and I opened the back of it and I took the batteries out. Then I set it down. I'm not going to play your music anymore, I thought. I'm not going to broadcast on your frequency, perform on your channel, dance to whatever story you've decided about me. The speaker was dead now, by my own hand, and it felt like the first choice I'd ever made entirely for myself. Here's where I stopped explaining myself to people who'd already decided I was the problem. My father left a legal will, and my mother had been sitting on it for 4 months. If your gut ever told you the story didn't add up, trust it. Because what the attorney told me next is the part I'll never forget. I went back to Desai because I needed to understand exactly what I could and couldn't do, and I wanted it precise. He was patient with me. Your father's will is valid, he said. It was properly executed. The question isn't whether it's real. The question is why it hasn't been brought before the court. He explained it the way I'd explain a data flow to a client. In Georgia, he said, a valid will generally has to be filed with the probate court so the estate can be administered, and anyone who's holding an original is supposed to deliver it to the court within a set time after the death. I'm holding the original here, so that part's covered, he said. But your mother received her copy and has had clear knowledge of this will for 4 months. She's the one closest to your father's affairs, and she said nothing and done nothing. I won't overstate it. Withholding a copy isn't the same as hiding the original, and a lot depends on what she does from here. But if it ever came out that she deliberately concealed its existence from a named beneficiary to keep that account, that's the kind of conduct a court takes seriously. He was careful with his words, the way good lawyers are. He didn't promise me anything. I can't guarantee outcomes, he said. But here's the part that matters for you. You don't need her permission or her cooperation. You're a named beneficiary. You have standing. You can petition to open probate yourself, bring this will before the court, and ask that it be honored. Standing. I rolled the word around. For my whole life I'd had no standing in my own family, no claim, no leg to stand on. Just the obligation to keep giving. And now a careful man in reading glasses was telling me that the law, unlike my mother, did not care that I was the strong one. The law cared about a document, and I had the document. What do I need to do? I asked. He slid a legal pad across the desk. We file, he said, quietly and correctly. And we let the paperwork do what your father wanted it to do. I picked up the pen. For the first time, I wasn't calculating how to fix things for everyone else. I was building something for me. That evening I printed everything. I'm a documents person. I always have been. Blueprints, calculations, permits, the paper trail that keeps a building standing and a person accountable. So I printed the spreadsheet, all of it, both columns, the zero and the totals and my father's line at the bottom. And I printed the will. I laid them side by side on my kitchen table under the light, and they stopped being wounds and became something else. Evidence. Not the secret, shameful kind I'd carried in my chest for years, the clean, ordered kind that holds up. The spreadsheet wasn't a knife in my ribs anymore. It was an exhibit. And as I looked at those pages, I made a decision about how I was going to do this. Because the how mattered to me as much as the what. I was not going to scream. I was not going to call every relative and air it all out in a flurry of texts and tears, matching Kavita's whisper campaign with one of my own. That was their way, the loud way, the messy way, the way that made strong feelings into weapons. That wasn't mine. I would do it the way my father would have, the way a data analyst does. Quietly, correctly, in the open, in the right venue, with the document doing the talking. I would file the will with the court properly, on the record, where no amount of my mother's syrupy voice could make it disappear. And I would let the truth sit in a public room where the people who'd watched me get a junk drawer speaker would have to watch it, too. I wasn't going to fight my mother on her terms. I was going to win on my father's. I slid the pages into a folder, labeled it neatly, and set it by the door.
Monday, I thought.
Monday I file. But first, the family had one more move to make. The move came as a summons. My mother called, and her voice had shifted from syrup to steel. We're all gathering for Kavita's engagement announcement party this Sunday, she announced, at my house. Everyone's coming. We're going to settle this Priya situation as a family, and you're going to be there, Anya. A family gathering. I almost admired the strategy. In my family, a family gathering is not a discussion. It's a tribunal, and the verdict is decided before anyone sits down. My mother would gather the relatives, frame me as the selfish daughter refusing to help her divorced sister, and apply the full weight of family pressure until I cracked and opened my wallet. It had worked 100 times before. It was, frankly, a good plan. There was just one thing she didn't know.
She didn't know what was in the laptop.
She didn't know I'd found the spreadsheet, found the letters, met with Desai, printed the will. She thought she was calling me to a room to be shamed into compliance. She was actually building me a stage, a room full of witnesses, the exact public venue I'd needed. Couldn't have engineered better myself. I'll be there, I said. And I made sure my voice carried nothing but mild, tired resignation. The voice of a woman who knows she's about to lose an argument. What time? 2:00, she said, satisfied, already tasting the win. And Anya, don't make a scene. You know how you can get. How I can get. I'd never made a scene in my life. I'd spent 35 years not making scenes, swallowing things whole so the family could stay comfortable. I wouldn't dream of it, I said. And I hung up and looked at the folder by my door. The will and the spreadsheet waiting quietly inside it. And for the first time in months, I almost smiled. The day before the party, Priya came to my house. Alone. She'd never once come to my house in the 3 years I'd owned it. She stood on my porch by the lemon tree looking smaller than I remembered. Her eyes puffy. A cardigan pulled tight around her like armor that didn't fit.
Can I come in? She said.
I let her in. I made chai, my father's habit. 2 cups, and we sat at the table where the folder used to be before I moved it. For a while, she just turned the cup in her hands. Then she said, Mom says you won't help me, that you have the money, and you're just being cruel. Is that what you came to say?
No.
Her voice wobbled. I came because I don't understand what happened to us. We used to be okay, you and me. And now Mom's got everyone calling you greedy, and she stopped. And then she said the thing I'll always remember. Quiet. Almost to herself. I didn't know about the will, Anya. Whatever it is Mom's so scared of. I swear I didn't know. And I believed her. That's the complicated part. I looked at my sister, who'd been handed everything and was still falling apart, who'd been so cushioned her whole life that she'd never built a single muscle of her own, and I felt something that wasn't quite forgiveness, but lived next door to it. She was a person, too. A spoiled, frightened, badly raised person, but a person. For one moment, I saw her clearly. And then she ruined it. She wiped her eyes, looked up, and said, So, can you just cover the rent? 8,000. Mom said you'd understand. And there it was. Even now, even here, the hand. Always out, the only language she'd ever been taught. I'll see you tomorrow, Priya, I said gently, and I walked her to the door. That night, I called Desai at home, which he told me I could do, and I walked him through my plan one more time, because I needed to be sure I was standing on solid ground. I'm going to a family gathering tomorrow, I said. My mother thinks it's to pressure me into paying my sister's rent. I want to bring the will and the spreadsheet. I want to tell them the truth in front of everyone and then file Monday morning. Is there anything about that which causes a problem legally?
He thought about it.
You're a beneficiary informing your family of the existence of a valid will, which is entirely your right, he said. You're not making threats. You're not extorting anyone. You're telling the truth and announcing your lawful intent to probate. I'd advise you to stay calm, stick to the documents, and avoid accusations you can't support. Let the paper speak. Let the paper speak. I wrote it on my hand. Almost. And Anya, he added, and his voice changed, became less lawyer and more the man who'd softened when he heard my father's name. Your father came to me alone, drove himself, sat in that chair where you sat, and spent an hour making sure this would reach you, and only you. He didn't have to do any of it. I just thought you should hear that before tomorrow. I sat in my dark kitchen for a long time after we hung up. I thought about my father in his robe at midnight, making 2 cups of chai, never saying he was proud, just sitting. I thought about how he must have driven to that office alone, this quiet man, and worked out the exact dollar figure of a fairness he couldn't give me while he lived. I laid out my clothes for the next day. Nothing dramatic. A plain gray blazer, the kind I wear to client meetings, the kind that says I am a professional, and I am not here to perform for you. I put the folder in my bag, and I practiced once out loud the calm, flat sentence I planned to lead with. I'm not angry. I just have a document. Then I went to bed. And I slept, finally, like the strong one I'd been forced to become, about to use that strength for myself for the very first time. Sunday at 2 o'clock, I walked into my mother's living room, and it was exactly the tribunal I'd expected, disguised as a celebration. They were all there for Kavita's engagement announcement. Uncle Suresh on the recliner with his arms crossed. Kavita on the love seat, already wearing the pinched, righteous look of someone who's been telling stories. Aunt Gita in the corner, anxious. Priya on the couch beside our mother, small and red-eyed. And my mother, Mrs. Jaya Sharma, in the center of it all, in her good chair, beneath the silver-framed Charleston photo on the mantel, presiding. She let me sit. She let the silence build, the way she does, a master of the room. Then she began. We're all here, she said, because we love this family, and because one of us has decided she's too good to help her own sister in her hour of need. Her eyes settled on me, sorrowful and hard at once. Anya, your sister is about to lose her home. You have the means to help, and you've said no. So we're going to talk about that, all of us together, until you understand what family means. Kavita made a small sound of agreement. Uncle Suresh grunted. The pressure in the room turned toward me like a tide, exactly as my mother had engineered it. And I want you to understand, this was the moment I'd been bent toward my whole life. The moment where the family aims its full weight at me, and I fold. I soothe. I pay. I keep the peace. My mother sat back, certain, waiting for me to crumble or to argue, because either one would lose. I did neither. I reached into my bag. I took out the folder. I set it on the coffee table in the center of the room, unopened, and I folded my hands on top of it. Before I say no, I said, my voice perfectly even, I think everyone here should know what's in this folder. My mother's expression flickered, just slightly. The pond freeze of her face developed one small crack. Anya, this isn't the time for, it's exactly the time, I said, not loudly. I never once raised my voice that whole afternoon.
I want you to know that.
I opened the folder. I took out the first set of pages and laid them on the table where everyone could see. This is a spreadsheet my father kept for 15 years, I said, on his own computer. The one Mom told me had nothing on it but junk. I saw my mother go very still. It has 2 columns. One for Priya, one for me. I slid the totals page toward the center. Over 15 years, my parents spent a great deal of money on Priya. Tuition, a car, a condo down payment, $120,000 on the Charleston wedding. Priya's head came up. And in my column, I said, and here I let the silence do a little work, the way my mother taught me without meaning to. There is one number. It's a 0. Nobody spoke. Aunt Gita's hand had gone to her mouth. Uncle Suresh had uncrossed his arms. Kavita's righteous look had curdled into something uncertain. My wedding gift, I went on, was a used Bluetooth speaker Kavita found in a drawer. Kavita flinched. And when I asked, years ago, why the difference, my mother told me a sentence I've never forgotten. I looked at my mother. She said, we can't do the same for everyone. The room held its breath. And my mother, cornered, did the thing she always does. She reached for control. That spreadsheet proves nothing, she said sharply. Your father was a foolish, sentimental man who didn't understand our finances. This is exactly the kind of scene I asked you not to make. But her voice had a threat in it I'd never heard before.
Fear.
I'm not finished, I said, and I reached into the folder again. This time, I took out the will. I set it on the table beside the spreadsheet, the two documents together at last, the way they'd been meant to be. About a year before he died, my father went to a lawyer named Arjun Desai here in Atlanta alone. He drove himself. And he made a will. My mother's face had gone the color of paper. In it, he left a sum of money from his own separate account. Money he earned from his long-haul trucking work and never spent on himself. He left it to one person. I looked around the room slowly, at every face, and then back to my mother. He left $250,000 to me, not the whole gap between us. He couldn't reach the joint money or the house. Just every dollar he'd quietly saved on his own over years to say one daughter was worth something, too. I let that land. The will is valid, witnessed and notarized. Mr. Desai kept the signed original, and he sent a copy to this house 4 months ago, the week of the funeral, exactly as my father instructed, so the family would know. Now I turned fully to my mother, and I kept my voice as level and quiet as still water. Mom, you've had my father's will for 4 months. You knew there was money he wanted me to have. And instead of telling me, you told me his laptop was full of junk. You told me to stop digging. You called me jealous. You called me greedy through Kavita. And you called this whole family here today to pressure me into paying Priya's rent. I tapped the will once, gently, with one finger. While you were sitting on the inheritance, my father left me. The room was so silent I could hear the kitchen clock. Every face had turned from me to my mother. And that was the moment that the tide went out.
There's one more thing, I said.
And then I'll let you all get back to your afternoon. I picked up the spreadsheet again and turned to the last page, the bottom of the sheet. Below all the totals, to the single line my father had typed in plain, unformatted text, where he must have known someone would eventually find it. At the very bottom of his spreadsheet, under my name and that 0, my father wrote a note. I'm going to read it exactly as he wrote it. I looked down, though I'd long since memorized it. It says, "For Anya, because no one else will." I let it sit in the room. "For Anya, because no one else will." Aunt Gita made a small broken sound in the corner. Priya was crying openly now, but quietly, her hand over her mouth, and for once it didn't look like a performance. And then I said the thing I'd driven home from Desai's office, knowing I would someday say, the sentence that closed a 10-year-old wound with a single quiet turn. I looked at my mother and I said, "You always told me we can't do the same for everyone."
A beat.
Dad disagreed. Nobody moved. My mother opened her mouth and closed it. The Charleston photo glittered on the mantel above her head. 120,000 of evidence framed in silver. And for the first time in my life, it had no power over me at all. It was just a picture of a day that had cost a fortune, hanging above a woman who'd spent that fortune teaching one daughter she was worthless and the other that she was helpless, and called the whole arrangement love. I closed the folder. I had said what I came to say, calmly, completely, with the document on the table for everyone to see. And then my mother broke. It happened the way I'd somehow known it would. All those years I'd been cast as the one who might make a scene, and in the end, the scene was hers. My mother surged up out of her good chair, and her face came apart, and the syrup and the steel both fell away to show the thing underneath, which was panic. "How dare you," she said, and then louder. "How dare you, after everything I did for you, you ungrateful calculating girl, going through your dead father's things like a thief." "I'm not a thief," I said quietly. It was addressed to me. "He had no right," she cried. And there it was. The truth slipping out sideways the way truth does when people lose control. That was our money. Our family's money. And he went behind my back and she caught herself. Too late. The whole room had heard it. He went behind my back.
Not he was confused.
Not there's been a misunderstanding. He went behind my back. Because she'd always controlled the money, and my father had quietly, finally, taken a piece of it back to give to the daughter she'd zeroed out. She tried to recover. She turned to the room, to her audience, and reached for her oldest tool, the tears. "I only ever tried to keep this family together," she sobbed.
Priya needed me.
Anya never needed anyone. She said so herself. She's the strong one. And there it was. The phrase. One last time. I let her finish it. Then I stood up, smoothed my plain gray blazer, picked up my folder, and I said the calmest words of my life. I was the strong one because you left me no choice. I looked at her, not unkindly, just finished. I'm filing the will Monday morning. I'm not paying Priya's rent. And I'm not coming to any more family gatherings. Uncle Suresh was staring at the floor. Kavita had shrunk into the love seat. Aunt Gita was openly weeping. And my mother stood in the center of her own tribunal, with the verdict turned completely around.
No audience left.
The witnesses she'd summoned now witnesses to her instead. I picked up my bag. Thank you all for coming, I said. Because someone had to. And it might as well be me. I filed the will on Monday morning. Desai walked it through quietly and correctly, exactly as my father would have wanted. Probate takes time, but the document was clean and valid, and the court recognized it. In the end, I received the $250,000 my father had set aside, every dollar he'd quietly saved from his own work over the years. I didn't celebrate. It wasn't that kind of money. It was the kind that closes an old account, the kind you feel in your chest more than your bank balance. The family fractured along lines that had honestly been cracked for years. My mother, and I don't really speak now. She tells the relatives I tore the family apart over money, and a few of them believe her, and I've made my peace with that because the ones who matter saw the spreadsheet with their own eyes. Aunt Gita calls me every Sunday now. Uncle Suresh sent a short, awkward text a month later. I didn't know about any of that. Sorry, kid. From Suresh, that's practically a sonnet. Even Kavita, to my surprise, sent a message saying she felt terrible about the speaker, that your mom told me you'd love something practical. I believe she did. People believe what's easiest. Priya and I are something I don't have a word for yet, not close, not estranged. She got a job, her first real one at 36, and she calls sometimes just to talk, not to ask for anything, which is new. The last time I was at my mother's house, I looked at the Charleston photo on the mantel, the silver frame, the golden estate, and I felt nothing at all. It had been the most powerful object in my life for a decade. Now, it was just a picture. That, more than the money, was how I knew I was free. A few days later, I arranged for a courier to deliver a package to my mother's house. It was a single, elegantly framed print. Inside, in a simple font, were the words from my father's spreadsheet. For Anya, because no one else will. I didn't need the speaker anymore. It had been their accounting of me, their measure of my worth, and I was done carrying their math. When I got home, I opened my father's old laptop one final time. I looked at the folder named Girls, at the photographs he'd kept, the letters he'd written, the spreadsheet with his quiet line at the bottom for Anya, because no one else will. I read it once more. Then I closed the file and I closed the laptop and I let him rest. Being the strong one was never a gift my family gave me. It was a job they assigned, so they'd never have to choose me. And the cruelest part was how long I wore it like a crown instead of the weight it was, until my quiet father, who never once said he was proud, reached out from a folder on an old gray laptop to choose me anyway, and showed me that being seen by one person who means it is worth more than being applauded by everyone who doesn't. That's my story. A used speaker, a spreadsheet, and one line my father typed when he thought no one was looking. If someone ever told you that you were the strong one so they could stop showing up for you, take this as your sign to set that weight down. You're allowed to be chosen, too. Lessons from this story. Being perceived as strong in a family can lead to being overlooked and exploited. Familial favoritism and deception can cause deep and lasting emotional wounds. It is crucial to trust your intuition and seek out the truth when something feels wrong. Standing up for oneself with clear evidence can break cycles of unfair treatment and lead to personal freedom.